Well, if you remember, we had started with the divine plan, and it is from Sri Aurobindo's SABCL volume 17 actually. In fact, the pages from 27 to 31, these are the pages where Sri Aurobindo gives a diagram of all the with all the details of the divine plan. Now, what we discussed last time was the question of the absolute. That means, what is the divine reality? Because this divine reality is beyond time manifestation. So I will get back to the board again to just give you a little recap of what we had done, and then I'll take you forward. If you have these pages, well, you're welcome to follow, otherwise I'll tell you what we did. So this is the what he calls here the self-contained absolute. Now, of this self-contained absolute, we had given the first absolute, second absolute, and the third absolute. This we call the Tat. This is the Satchidananda. And the third one is the Aditi, or the Mother. This is what we have done till now. And this is what we can say, it is the sort of, if we can call it this A, the self-contained absolute. What we mean by the absolute is these three. Now, after this, we'll begin what we can say B. Is to take Sri Aurobindo's own word, he will call it manifestation in eternal time. Now, this is a bit of a difficult concept, we will look into that. Then C is manifestation in time, or in temporal time, we can just call it in time. Sri Aurobindo chooses the word temporal manifestation, or we can simply call it eternal time and time.
How can there be a time and time?
We can call it temporal manifestation. Now, these are the three different levels that we will discuss. The absolute, manifestation in eternal time, and manifestation in temporal manifestation. So, Sri Aurobindo also speaks about this in the Life Divine as we can call this, another word is timelessness or beyond time, and this is time. Whatever, the most important word that you should remember is the eternal and the temporal. So, these are the three different levels of this, what we can say, the creation, the manifestation. And as I said, I am giving you all this idea because the word the mother occurs here. So, the book that we see of this, the mother here, alludes to the same mother. So, I want you to understand the ontological position of the mother. It is only then we will be able to appreciate that this mother incarnating as the individual Mira Alfasa. So you can imagine what is that eternity, that timelessness which has manifest in time and as Mira Alfasa with an individual body. So that is the great descent, if we can call it. So that's why I want you to understand philosophically, ontologically, although last time I gave you some concept of the mother according to the Indian concept and the concepts in different cultures, at least in Sri Aurobindo, the position of the mother is this. So what does it mean? She belongs basically to the self-contained absolute. And of course we saw last time the definitions that we get here. Tat is that absolute transcendent. Satchitananda, here we said Ananda uniting Sat and Chit, that is existence, consciousness and Ananda. And Aditi is the indivisible consciousness force and Ananda of the Supreme. So you can see the definition is that she is the consciousness, force and Ananda. So she is this. So, but what is the difference, you may say, between the second absolute and the third absolute? She is the one who is the creatrix, who brings forth this Sat. In fact, as I told you, there is a phrase in this book, from the womb of the unknown, she brings forward this Sat into this world, or becomes this world. That's why she is even called the mediatrix, the one who mediates between the Tat and the temporal manifestation. That's why she is even called the golden bridge between the Tat, the first absolute, and the temporal manifestation. So all that we see in Savitri applies to this mother. So that is the position, and today I will take up the second one, because here we had also discussed about the fourth absolute, which is that of Parameshwara and Parameshwari. This is according to the Gita, this is according to the Tantra. In Tantra, Parameshwari is the Supreme. In the Gita, Parameshwara, or there's another word, those of you know Gita, it's called the Purushottama. Now, those of you who are not attuned to Indian philosophy, you may wonder why all these complications, so many names, whereas in other philosophies it is so very simple. There's one Spirit and the Holy Ghost, and then there's a creation, and then the Son of God, and rest is a simple thing. Well, in India, of course, our rishis have gone into great experience and analyzed it. You see, it is not the question of, as I said, it's a magic wand of a creation. That is the beauty of Indian philosophy. It is complex in the beginning, it's true. But look at the step-by-step analysis of each state. Well, now I will have a word about this before I come to the creation aspect. This Parameshwara or Purushottama or Tantra and Tantra, Parameshwari. Last time I had said it is the he and she aspects. But he and she is not male and female as we would imagine on the human level. It is the question of the Purushottama, Purusha and Prakriti. It is again a question of consciousness and force. This is the consciousness and this is the executrix. So the division is not between male and female or he and she. For our human language we use he and she, etc. But philosophically it is the consciousness and the force, which is there in all of us. Even at our own human level, we have these two parts in each one of us. There is a force that executes, that becomes, and there is a being that is watching, that is deciding, that is ordering, and there is a becoming that happens. So if you understand it that way, it's better. Instead of saying he and she, immediately you will say, oh, that means there is a male and female. It's not the male and female. It is the consciousness and the executive force. Now a word here about Tantra, certainly Sri Aurobindo does bring in this in order to make it easy perhaps for us to understand. In the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Gita, we have basically, that is the Vedas, Upanishad and the Gita. We have here the concept of Brahman, Purushottama, or what we said, the Parameshwara, whatever. This concept is predominant in the Vedas, Upanishads and the Gita. Predominant in the sense they do not almost recognize the mother or the force or the Shakti. I did mention last time that the Vedas speaks about Aditi maybe 6 to 8 times in the entire Vedas. They have the concept, but they never gave it an importance. So, in Indian culture, in that Vedic age, the whole focus was on realization of the self, realization of the Brahman, realization of the Atman. So, for all that, the process that was given was meditation. So, the means for attaining the Brahman was the process of meditation. So, for the first thousands of years, 4,000 to 5,000 years, we had only the meditation aspect which was predominant. But afterwards, as against this tendency, meditation means it was intellectual, rational analysis, mental consciousness. So that we can say is the consciousness of the mind. But in India, this has been, Sri Aurobindo would always mention this in his Foundations of Indian Culture, that India went to an extreme in one line, be it philosophy, be it art, be it psychology, sociology, anything. Then it sees quite an end there, and then it comes back and goes to the other end. It's never satisfied having reached one end. It says there's the end and finito. There is, he says, they say, there must be something else, and another dimension, another aspect of the divine. So what happened after this tendency? There was what we have, the Tantra. Tantra took us on a different channel completely. They said, no, it is not the mind alone which is important. There is the emotion, the heart, and the body. They said, why isn't that we are not looking after the body and the heart of the human being? So they specifically, purposefully, they took to the other aspects of the human being, and they said heart and body are as important, and they could be the means of realizing the supreme reality. And not only that, when it comes to the lower level, the human level, Vedas and Upanishads, if they concentrated on the mental aspect or the man aspect, Tantra said we will insist on the heart and the woman aspect. So there was an absolute swing from man to woman, from mind to the heart, from the intellect to the emotion. So Tantra developed its own science, its own yoga, and we said no, our importance is the woman, is the Shakti, is the mother. So thanks to the Tantra, that we had a swing from Brahman to the mother, to the Aditi. So Aditi, who was only a name mentioned there, becomes the focus point of Tantra. So even in Tantra, they said if the Brahman, if the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Gita, they speak about higher qualities of the human being, the meditation aspect, the higher being, all the upper levels so called. Tantra says man is not just the upper levels, the higher consciousness. He has also the lower vital, the lower physical, the lower impulses, even going to the lowest impulse called the sex impulse. He says if God has created all this, they have a meaning. Why should we neglect those parts? Can we not purify them and use them also for achieving the higher consciousness? So it was a very beautiful, systematic, purposeful swing from the mind to the heart, from man to the woman, from the intellect to the emotion. So that's how we have a kind of a counterbalance between the Vedas and the Tantra. And at present I am going through a book on Kashmir Shaivism, and I found it very interesting that there is the third trend, the Kashmiri Shaivism, or we can call it Shaivism itself, which has been a wonderful synthesis between the Vedas and the Tantra. I would perhaps dare say Shaivism has been a precursor to Sri Aurobindo in its essential aspects. Of course, Sri Aurobindo brings in the new concept of the supermind and the supramental realization and transformation. Apart from this concept of the transformation of the supermind, you find tremendous similarities between Shaivism and Sri Aurobindo. If they had not meant, if you are not given the name, you would think it is Sri Aurobindo who is speaking that. That is the fundamental synthesis. So Shaivism brings in the synthesis between Vedas and Tantra. So you see, that is again a beautiful movement in Indian philosophy. There are two extremes and then there is a synthesis. And then the same thing happened when Gita came. Gita also says Vedas and Upanishads, they concentrated too much on the mind. And Gita brings in the emotional level, the bhakti aspect, and the works aspect, the karma. It's not just jnana, it's not just the mind. So Gita tries to bring in another kind of synthesis between the mind and the heart, between Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And Sri Aurobindo now is that grand master of synthesis who brings in Vedas, Upanishads, Gita, Tantra, and all that. So we see Indian philosophy move from one synthesis to another synthesis, a greater synthesis. So today if we have Sri Aurobindo synthesis of yoga, you will find all these elements. That's why when I give you all that, it will also help you to understand our own synthesis of yoga or any other works of Sri Aurobindo. Because it becomes richer, your understanding becomes richer if you know all these basics of Indian philosophy. Now coming back, so I've taken you from this idea of Tantra. So this is where Parameshwari, the female energy, comes into focus, the Tantra. But at this level, we must remember, Sri Aurobindo mentions there more to give us a clarification, but in his absolutes, there is no Tantra and Gita at that time. We cannot really talk about that on that level of the triple absolute. But I brought in because Sri Aurobindo mentions here the name Parameshwara of the Gita and Parameshwari of the Tantra. So we have basically, well, he gives it that way, Tat, Sat and Sachidananda and the Aditi, and we have Parameshwari and Parameshwara. Yeah. So we have come till here. Now we begin the eternal manifestation or eternal time. You see, we are not yet coming to the manifestation, remember. It's still beyond time. It calls it the, we have in Sri Aurobindo, as I was telling you, the concepts of timeless, eternity, and time eternity. Well, those are the concepts that we are applying here. This is the timeless eternity, is this creation manifestation in eternal time. Now, what is that? It is definitely very complex, but if you want to understand the life divine and also a little bit of this book, The Mother, you need to get these basic ideas clear. Now, because he moves on from this to the next level, where he brings in the manifestation in eternal time, he says, what does this mean, manifested in eternal time? Now, this is basically, if you understand this, if you remember this, what is the breakup of Sachidananda? We said Sat, Chit, Tapas, and Ananda. So, this eternal manifestation or manifestation in eternal time is composed of 4 worlds, which he calls, or he not only Satyaloka, Chitloka, Tapoloka, and Anandaloka. Well, towards the end, even the Vedas also mention about this. When we say evolution is eternal, Vedas also mention that there is evolution beyond supermind. Evolution doesn't stop with supermind at all. He says, there are worlds beyond the supermind. See, till now supermind has not even come into picture. That's what you should understand. Supermind, which is supposed to be the creator of this universe, hasn't yet come into the picture of this divine plan. It will come later. Now, what's happening? From this principle of consciousness, Parameshwara and Parameshwari, there begin the four lokas, the four worlds. These are the four worlds. That means of each aspect, in each of these worlds, loka is the world, the dominant principle is that of Sat or Chit or Tapas or Ananda. In fact, if you are interested, look up this volume of the 12, is it 12? Yeah, 122. This is volume 22, page number 122. I mean, he gives volume 12, page 122. Well, I have explained this just in one sentence. He says the same thing. I mean, a short description. He is explaining the higher worlds as we get them in Isha Upanishad and the Vedas. When tapas or energy of self-conscience dwells upon Sat or pure existence as its basis, the result is Satya Loka or world of true existence. When tapas dwells upon active power of Chit as its basis, the result is Tapoloka or the world of energy of self-conscience. When tapas dwells upon active delight of being as its basis, the result is Janaloka or creative delight. Well, here we have mentioned, but in this description, Sri Aurobindo mentions only about one world, that is, he says the Satyaloka, he calls this as the Tapoloka, and he calls this another name Janaloka, another name for the world of delight. However, we just get the essence of it, because later we are going to get into the details. Let me first finish the divine plan. So, after this, now just remember this is a continuation of what I will be drawing here. So, after this eternal time, now comes, as he puts it in the next plan sheet, which is page number 30 of this volume, then he mentioned the word divine gnosis. That means, after this, next is the divine gnosis. Divine gnosis, we have for the first time something of the supermind coming in, and with the divine gnosis begins the temporal manifestation. So, what is the whole idea? We had the Sat, Chit, Ananda, and we had the Tat, Sachitananda, the mother, and then we had this eternal time where the mother is creating these four lokas or the four worlds. After that, there is the birth of the divine gnosis or the supermind. To give you another diagram, it is like this. What Sri Aurobindo calls the upper hemisphere. This upper hemisphere is actually, if I can put it again, now this is the upper hemisphere and this is the lower hemisphere. Now, in this upper hemisphere, Whatever we have done till now is here. Tat, Sat, Aditi, and the four worlds, Satyaloka, Tapoloka, and Anandaloka. Then comes the supermind, the divine gnosis or the supermind. So this is the position of supermind in the whole ontological explanation of Sri Aurobindo's view of the creation. So we have what we will call the higher worlds, or this is the eternal time, or what we say eternal time manifestation, or timeless eternity, whatever we want to call. So this is the timeless eternity called the upper hemisphere. Now there comes in, again this is all the creation of the Aditi. Remember, why we are doing this is to understand what is the work of the Aditi. She has created these 3 or 4 worlds, and then she brings forth means she becomes herself supermind, or the other word is Vijnanamaya Shakti. Vijnana refers to supermind. And towards the end of this chapter of the book, actually, he would call the mother as the supramental Mahashakti. This is what is really of great revelation to us, that this Aditi, she becomes the supramental Mahashakti, and it is this supramental Mahashakti who comes into the physical as the Mira Alphasa. So who is this mother at present? She is basically the supramental Mahashakti. And now what is the supramental Mahashakti? He gives a description here of the supermind. He calls it, from the point of view of our ascent toward this is the truth consciousness as distinguished from all below that belongs to the separative ignorance. And then in most of us have some idea, but later on I'll explain the supramental Mahashakti. But this is more to see the diagram of the supermind. And then comes here, the first thing is the overmind. So the highest consciousness of the lower atmosphere is the overmind. So these are the 2 hemispheres. He distinctly divides them, and that is where the supermind is the bridge between the upper hemisphere and the lower hemisphere, or the higher hemisphere and the lower hemisphere. That's why this consciousness is so very crucial, because it is the bridging consciousness. Once one reaches the supermind, then only one enters the higher or the upper hemisphere. And at that level, evolution, now if you ask the question, where does evolution go? From supermind, it goes into Ananda Loka, from there Tapoloka, then to Satyaloka. Loka means worlds. So again there are the infinite number of worlds between these. So there is no question of a stopping of the evolution, it goes on and on. Now coming back to our own question here. So when we come to the lower hemisphere, the first thing that we get is the overmind. And of overmind or Maya, which is called in the Vedas, overmind takes all truth that comes down to it from the supermind, but sets up each truth as a separate force and idea capable of conflicting with the others as well as cooperating with them.